On October 12th, the Henderson family left their gravel driveway before the sun had fully burned the mist from the trees, their green Bronco rolling toward Laurel Ridge, a trail locals described as safe, gentle, familiar. By nightfall, that same trail would become a question no one could answer. Search crews would later describe the scene as too clean. No tracks, no prints, no signs of departure. Just a vehicle paused in place, doors closed, food untouched, as if the family had stepped away for only a moment. The mountains offered no explanation, only quiet. Those who stood at the trailhead that first evening remembered the wind, moving through the trees without carrying a single echo of the children's names being called. It was the kind of silence that feels deliberate, as if the land itself were listening. Somewhere in that stillness, the story of the Henderson family began to disappear, and if you listen closely enough, even now, you can hear the moment when the mountain first decided not to give them back. If this story stays with you, consider walking these paths with us again by quietly subscribing as the fog settles in. By Monday morning, October 14th, the Klay County Sheriff's Office officially classified the Henderson family as missing. What had begun as a neighbor's concern became an organized response before noon. Mark Henderson, 35 mill worker, methodical and cautious. Dana Henderson, experienced outdoorswoman, trained in wilderness safety during college. 3 children, all under 12. A weekend trip that should have ended with tired smiles and muddy boots. The Bronco was discovered parked neatly at the Laurel Ridge trailhead, keys still in the ignition. A picnic cooler rested in the back seat, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, a thermos half filled with lemonade. The dashboard radio remained tuned to a country station that barely reached that elevation anymore. One of Mark's maps lay folded on the passenger seat, a red circle marking a scenic overlook 2 miles up the ridge. No footprints surrounded the vehicle, not even partial impressions in the soft soil left by the previous night's light rain. Deputies documented the absence carefully. Even in heavy weather, something should have remained. Search teams formed by early afternoon. Rangers, volunteers, local firefighters, helicopters lifted from a clearing just beyond the trailhead. Rotor wash bending the trees into slow green waves. Whistles echoed. Children's names drifted through the undergrowth and dissolved into the canopy. By sunset, nothing had answered. The following day brought rain. Cold, steady, relentless. Trails turned to red clay ribbons. Dogs were brought in from neighboring counties. They traced a scent less than a mile from the parking area before stopping abruptly, whining, tails low, refusing to advance. The location was logged near the ridge overlook. By Wednesday, the operation expanded. Grid maps, additional crews. Radios began to misbehave. The static bled into voices. Rangers noted compass needles drifting off alignment near a lower section of the ridge locals called Devil's Basin. One deputy remarked that north seemed to move when you stood there midweek. A ranger named Bill Drummond spotted something caught high in a tree above the basin, faded blue fabric torn along one edge. Photographs later confirmed it matched the jacket Dana Henderson wore in family pictures from that weekend. The discovery briefly steadied the teams. It was the first tangible fragment of the family. It also raised new questions. The basin lay nearly 6 miles from where the Bronco had been found. The terrain between was unforgiving even for seasoned hikers. Search dogs reacted strangely whenever they approached the basin's edge, halting at the same invisible line. Sound itself behaved differently there. Volunteers later described it as walking underwater. Their own breathing felt distant, muffled, removed from the world as the days passed. The optimism that filled the first coals began to thin. Helicopters circled above a forest so dense their shadows barely touched the ground. Ground teams scoured creek beds, ravines, and old logging cuts. No fire pits, no campsites, no scraps of packaging, not a single child's shoeprint. Hunters in the region reported hearing 3 sharp cracks echoing along the ridge late Saturday night. Others whispered of an orange glow seen in the distance the following morning. None of it aligned with evidence. All of it entered the logs anyway. Investigators turned their attention to the abandoned mining tunnels threading beneath portions of the ridge. Hundreds existed, many undocumented, some collapsing under decades of water and rot. Cameras were lowered into accessible shafts. They found only black water and cold air. By the second week, the operation shifted tone, rescue to recovery. The sheriff admitted privately that the mountain was fighting them. Maps did not match the terrain. Trails vanished beneath fallen branches as fast as they were cleared. One ranger said it felt as if the land itself did not want to be searched. Late in the operation, standing near the basin's edge, Lydia Crowell, Dana's younger sister, listened to the silence and said quietly that something about the place felt wrong. Not dangerous, not threatening, just absent, like a page torn from the world. If any detail in this investigation stands out to you so far, leave it in the comments. Sometimes patterns emerge where silence tries to hide them. By the time November's first snow dusted the upper ridge, the official search was scaled back. Funding thinned. Crews withdrew. A single line closed the final report. Family not located. Area too steep for further recovery. But the mountain did not feel finished. It felt patient. The search that followed the Henderson family's disappearance was not simply exhaustive, it was unsettled. By late October 1985. Laurel Ridge had developed a reputation among the crews assigned to it. Rangers from neighboring counties began requesting reassignment after only a few days on the mountain. They cited exhaustion, poor conditions, unreliable equipment, but the incident logs reveal something more precise: recurring interference, unexplained disorientation, an environmental behavior that refused to follow known patterns. The first documented anomaly appeared in the radio transcripts. At 14:17 on October 20th, Unit 3 attempted contact with base. The transmission returned as a burst of static layered with a low rhythmic clicking. Technicians later examined the recording. The sound was not atmospheric. It did not match weather interference or electrical bleed. No source was identified. Compass failures followed. Multiple field teams reported needles drifting as they approached Devil's Basin, not spinning wildly, just slowly pulling away from north, as if the concept itself were unreliable in that stretch of terrain. One ranger recorded in his notebook, checked compass 3 times, each reading different. Map doesn't fit ground here. Tracking became impossible. Even experienced woodsmen could not establish continuity. Footprints would appear briefly in soft clay, then vanish as though lifted from the earth. Dogs traced scent directly toward the basin's mouth before stopping, sitting, and refusing to continue. Trainers attempted coaxing, physical guidance, even lifting the animals. The dogs resisted. The forest's acoustic properties changed as well. Searchers noted that voices carried poorly, shouted commands, returned thin and delayed. In certain pockets, no echo returned at all. A volunteer firefighter later described shouting his own name near the basin and hearing nothing come back. It was like the sound fell into the ground. He said, night operations became restricted after 2 rangers became disoriented less than half a mile from base camp. Both men reported seeing the same impossible detail, boot prints ahead of them that did not belong to their team. The impressions ended abruptly at a bare rock face where no one could have climbed without equipment. Another team logged the appearance of 3 parallel sets of footprints leading toward a steep gully to adult. One child's highs discovered after a rainstorm that should have erased them entirely. When the team returned the following morning with supervisors, the prints were gone. By early November, search logs grew shorter, colder, more restrained. Static increasing compasses, unreliable. Dogs refusing basin perimeter hyro, unresponsive. Even the helicopters reported anomalies. Pilots complained of depth perception distortion over the basin. One aborted a descent after his instruments disagreed with his eyes. Ground crews watching from below swore the aircraft tilted at an impossible angle before pulling away. The mountain did not behave like terrain, that behaved like a sealed space. On November 4th, during a late sweep near the overlook, a volunteer named Thomas Keene recorded something that never entered the official file. His personal notebook described hearing children's laughter at dusk. No team members were near him. When he followed the sound, it faded into the trees. Keene resigned from the operation 2 days later and refused all interviews. By mid-November, the county reduced operations to minimal patrol. Snow threatened the ridge. Visibility collapsed, and the logs ended with the same phrase appearing again and again. Nothing further to report. Yet something about Laurel Ridge continued to reject closure, even after the crews withdrew. Hikers avoided Devil's Basin. Locals stopped camping near the overlook. Hunters reported animals refusing to cross certain clearings, and those who did enter the forest returned early, saying the place felt too quiet, as if the mountain were holding its breath. If this investigation feels like it's drawing you deeper, a quiet gesture of support, a simple like helps these stories reach others who are still listening. In the town of Klay, the Henderson home did not change at first. The porch light remained on. Dana's coat still hung by the door. The children's shoes stayed lined beneath the bench, dried mud cracking along the soles. 4 weeks after October 12th, neighbors continued glancing toward the driveway at dusk, expecting the familiar green Bronco to roll back into place. It never did. Mark Henderson had been known for routines. He checked weather forecasts obsessively. He labeled food containers. He wrote fuel mileage in the back of a notebook. Dana teased him for it, but she trusted him. Friends described her as steady, unshakable, the kind of person who made fear seem unnecessary simply by standing beside you. Their children followed that calm instinctively. None of them were reckless. None of them disappeared by accident of carelessness. When investigators reconstructed the weekend, nothing stood out as unusual. Mark had requested Friday afternoon off work. Dana had arranged homework schedules for the following week. The children argued about sleeping bags. Dana's sister Lydia was supposed to receive a call Sunday evening when they returned. She never did. Lydia became the gravity of the case, while official searches faded. Hers never did. She walked the ridge until her knees failed. She taped new flyers over the old ones. She wrote down every rumor, every whispered sighting, every fragment of possibility. Her notebook became a ledger of absence. Marriages collapsed around her obsession. Jobs slipped away. But she continued returning to the same places, especially Devil's Basin, standing at the edge, listening. She said the quiet there felt like memory. Years passed. then decades. In 1992, a hunter found a child's shoe near a creek. It wasn't theirs. In 1997, hikers reported voices at dusk. Nothing followed. In 2005, Lydia sold her home and moved closer to the ridge, spending her days tracing old maps and service roads erased from newer ones. By 2007, she could no longer hike. Her body had begun to fail, but the case never left her table. Maps layered with notes, faded photographs, one overlooked ranger report from 1987 mentioning fresh tire, impressions on a decommissioned logging road south of the original trailhead, a detail that never made the official perimeter. Time did not resolve the Henderson family. It only buried them deeper inside the world. And then, in 2018, a stranger with a drone flew over Devil's Basin and the mountain finally allowed something to be seen. The Henderson family did not return to the world all at once. They emerged slowly, piece by piece, after the mountain decided it had kept them long enough. In February 2018, freelance environmental surveyor Evan Mercer was contracted by the state to map erosion-prone forest regions south of Klay County. The job was technical, routine, uneventful. His drone flew slow grid patterns over thousands of acres of unbroken canopy. Nothing remarkable appeared on the first 2 days. On the third day, at 1642, sunlight struck something unnatural. A curved reflection glinted beneath the trees, visible for less than half a second between swaying branches. Mercer nearly dismissed it as lens flare. That night, he reviewed the footage frame by frame. He stopped on the shape, magnified the image. Metal. Not debris, not rock. The roofline of a vehicle. The coordinates placed it in a ravine 6 miles south of the original search zone, on the opposite side of Devil's Basin, in terrain that had been declared inaccessible in 1985. Within 48 hours, a joint task force of state police, park rangers, forensic teams, and geologists were hiking toward the location. They reached the ravine at dusk. What they found barely resembled a vehicle anymore. An overturned green Ford Bronco lay crushed against the hillside, its body twisted inward, the frame partially swallowed by tree roots and soil. The windshield was gone. Moss layered the hood. A sapling had grown through the rear axle. The forest had been patiently dismantling it for decades. Sheriff Tom Reeves scraped away mud from the rear plate. The registration matched the Henderson's VIN. Fragments were recovered from the engine block. Forensic confirmation followed weeks later. The Henderson family's vehicle, missing for 33 years, had never left the mountain. Which raised a question no report could answer. What vehicle had been photographed, logged, and impounded in 1985? Excavation began the next morning. Personal items surfaced first. Fragments of clothing, shattered glass, children's toys crushed into the earth. A warped sneaker sole lodged beneath the passenger door. On the fourth day, crews breached the driver's compartment. 5 skeletons remained inside. Seatbelts were still fastened. The positions indicated survival of the initial impact. The family had not been thrown. They had been trapped. Dana in the passenger seat, Mark at the wheel. The children in back. No evidence of third-party involvement. No defensive injuries. No signs of escape attempt. The conclusion was clinical: crash, entrapment, exposure. And yet, the official history fractured. Records from 1985 showed the Henderson Bronco had been located at the Laurel Ridge trailhead, photographed, impounded, and transferred to a county facility. But when investigators reopened the file, no physical vehicle could be located. The storage facility listed in the report had no intake record. Photographs were missing from evidence storage. Only paperwork remained. Then another detail surfaced. Inside the wreck's glove compartment lay a folded, waterlogged brochure from 1978 showing an old service road, one that no longer appeared on modern maps. Geologists overlaid the route. The forgotten road led straight into the ravine where the Bronco now lay. The Hendersons likely followed it in dense fog, unaware it had been decommissioned years earlier. The crash explanation made sense. The evidence history did not. Beneath the driver's seat, technicians recovered a broken Park Service radio casing, a model never issued to civilians. Serial numbers traced it to a batch, decommissioned in the late 1970s. No record explained how it reached the Henderson vehicle. The case officially closed in 2019. The final handwritten note in the file, penned by a ranger who had worked the original 1985 search, read, "Sometimes the mountain decides when the truth surfaces," and Laurel Ridge returned to silence. The Henderson family was laid to rest in November of 2018, beneath a low gray sky in Charleston. 5 caskets stood in a single line. No speeches tried to offer comfort that the evidence could not support. The final report used careful language: accident, outdated maps, environmental conditions, exposure. The words were correct. They were also insufficient. Investigators would later admit how close they had come to the wreck in 1985. In some places, less than half a mile, close enough to stand above it without ever seeing it, close enough to hear nothing and believe the mountain was empty. Midway through the memorial service, Lydia Crowell slipped her hand into her coat pocket and unfolded the last surviving missing person flyer. The paper was yellowed, the ink almost gone, She placed it among the flowers and whispered something no one else could hear. If this story stays with you, and you believe these voices deserve to remain remembered, quietly consider subscribing as the years continue to pass. Laurel Ridge remains open today. Hikers still follow the loop trail. The basin is avoided. New markers redirect travelers away from the forgotten road. The forest has closed its scar with ferns and shadow. On clear mornings, when fog pools low and the wind falls silent, sunlight sometimes flashes deep in the trees where the wreck once lay. There is nothing there now, but the locals say the mountain keeps the memory of what it takes, and sometimes it waits.